Those viewers who have seen my earlier video on rigging up my Basement Watchdog Big Dog Plus backup sump pump will also possibly remember the way I've got my dual sump pumps and dual discharge lines rigged up. That's been working pretty well, but I've had some issues early in 2018 here, leading up into the summer, where I no longer trusted the rig even though I'd put new flexible hoses in, which is the way I'd always done it. I was having a lot of problems with them springing leaks and so on. Just the hoses were inferior. I thought maybe I had too much hydrostatic pressure in those lines, possibly too much resistance due to all the corrugations on the fairly long hoses, and it looked like it wasn't going to stand the test of time and I needed to do something about it. And that's the purpose of this video. I decided to hard pipe both sump pumps into the existing hard piped discharge lines as opposed to using the flexible hoses. And I went out and bought the necessary pre-cut or shortened lengths of 1.5 inch PVC pipe and various T's, elbows, and other fittings. I realized that with the backup pump on the right, where it needs to be to fit in between some other tiles entering the pit, and then the main pump more or less centered, and my discharge lines being reversed from that, I was going to have a crossover rig with the piping, and so I sketched it up in some detail and knew pretty much exactly which fittings I was going to use and what the layout was going to be before I started. First up was to pull the primary pump, which is a pedestal pump, out of the pit and pull off all of the fittings and so on. I put a threaded adapter in so I could go to the 1.5 inch PVC pipe directly at the pump and screw that in hand tight. You don't need to put pipe dope or Teflon tape on something like this. And then I had put it in the pit and adjusted it for a height that would put the check valve about the same height as the check valve on the Basement Watchdog, which was already set up, and made sure everything fit and was aligned in the pit, pulled it back out, and then used the PVC pipe dope to permanently attach the pipe to the fitting. I put on a new check valve, the same kind that I had on the Basement Watchdog. That one didn't need a new valve, it was just a few months old. One thing I like to have on my pump discharge lines is, it's not quite what's really called a telltale, but it's a tap that allows me to bleed water out. There have been a few times in the past, especially during very heavy rains, when the pumping is so slow I wonder if the line is obstructed, and it's useful to be able to open a tap and see if there is in fact pressurized water in the line and that the pump is actually doing something. So I've got a adapter here that throttles down from the 1.5 inch pipe to a small threaded fitting. Right now I've just got a pipe cap that's going to go in there to plug the hole, but I could put in a small ball valve or something to open up and let the water out of those lines. And here's the subassembly that allows me to tap into my existing hard pipe discharge lines. I just cut off all the old paraphernalia that was there with a Sawzall and just left the stub of the existing lines, put in a PVC coupler, and then went to my new T, and because I'm going to have these cross pipes, or pipes crossing each other, I wanted to have a disconnect on there that was going to be hopefully easier than taking apart the rubber fittings, so I decided to invest in the relatively expensive PVC unions on each of the lines. And here's the completed new hard piping for the primary pump. As you can see, I've got the check valve down at the bottom of the vertical, which allows me to dismantle it at that end, and then I've got the union on the cross piece heading over to the wall so I can dismantle it at that end. Because of the crossed piping, I realized it was going to get really difficult if I had to pull a pump out of the pit. Whatever I tried to raise out of the pit was going to hit those crossed pipes, so I really needed a way to get those out of the way, and hence the unions. I could have used just more of the hose clamps and heavy black rubber hose instead of the unions, but I thought the unions would be easier to deal with. And here's when I've pulled out all the stuff I'm going to discard from the backup pump, which is the Basement Watchdog one. I've got rid of all the flexible piping, but I'm keeping the existing riser from the pump because that's in good shape. I'm keeping the check valve since that's almost new, and I'm keeping this much of the existing discharge line that's bolted to the wall. And here's after I've completed the pipe assembly for the backup Basement Watchdog pump, crossing under the line for the primary pump, but it also has a union.